Hey everybody, I've got a quick video for you today, and I want to start with a question. And that question is, I want you to define what a playable frame rate is in the comments down below. Go ahead and pause the video, scroll down below that like button, and leave a comment telling me how many frames per second you think is an acceptable frame rate for a game in order for you to decide that that is playable. All right, now that you've got that out of the way, let's talk about Steam Deck Verified. I've actually made other videos about Deck Verified and whether or not the system works or doesn't work. But I was recently having a conversation with a friend of mine, Timo, over at the Deckverse. If you haven't checked out his stuff, make sure that you do. He's got some really, really good stuff on how to make your games work really, really well. I'll leave a link in the description down below. But we were having a conversation about what Deck Verified means. And I was really kind of playing devil's advocate with him because for the most part, I agree with everything that he was saying, but I was playing devil's advocate about what Deck Verified should mean. So let's start with that as a question. What do people think Deck Verified means? Well, I think a lot of people think that Deck Verified, I think they think of it like the Nintendo seal of quality. If you're really old, like me, then you probably remember the video game crash of 1983. And then when Nintendo brought out the NES in 85, they had the Nintendo seal of quality, basically saying, look, the other systems that caused the video game crash, they allowed anybody and everybody to make shovelware, and that's what caused the video game crash. What we're going to do instead is tell third-party manufacturers you can only make this many games per year. So they better be good. And they will get the Nintendo seal of quality, which was basically a way of telling the customers, look, these games are the good ones. Now, whether or not it was actually true or not is completely irrelevant to this particular conversation. But a lot of people look at Deck Verified, that little green check mark, and they say, I think that this game is probably a good game and it's going to be a good experience on the Steam Deck because it has the green check. Okay, why do people think this? Well, probably because of what is over on Steam's website. If you go to Steam's website, it says these games pass all compatibility checks and each one is a great experience. Notice the same color green and the little green check mark there. It's a great experience on the Steam Deck. So that leads people to think that every single game that gets a green check mark must be a great experience on the Steam Deck. But that's not really what it means. That's marketing. So what does Steam Deck Verified mean? Well, Valve has a couple of places that you can go to find that out. Before I tell you about that, though, real quick, I just want to tell you about the Humble Feel the Rhythm bundle. There's a link in the description if you want to check it out. This has, let's see, 7 games that you can get for $16. And if you use my link down below, you will be directly supporting the channel because I am a Humble Bundle partner. I will say that only one of these games is verified. A couple of them are playable and a couple of them are, as of yet, untested. So, you know, just wanted to let you guys know about that deal. All right. So what does it actually mean? What does Deck Verified actually mean? Well, we're going to go to steamdeck.com/en/verified and see what it actually means. There's 2 places that we're going to look at. First off, games that are verified, games that check these 4 boxes are Deck Verified. Number 1, input. The title should have full controller support, use appropriate controller input icons, and automatically bring up the on-screen keyboard when needed. Seamlessness. The title shouldn't display any compatibility warnings, and if there's a launcher, it should be navigable with a controller. Display. The game should support the default resolution of the Steam Deck at 1280 by 800 or 1280 by 720 and have good default settings, and the text should be legible. And the last one, system support. If running through Proton, the game and all of its middleware should be supported by Proton. This includes anti-cheat support. All right, so just by looking at these 4 metrics, nowhere in these four metrics does Valve actually specify the frame rate that you would need a game to run at in order to be playable. And that's really the crux of what we're talking about today. That's why I asked you at the beginning of the video to make that comment down below the like button. Because for different people, this means different things. So I decided to look at the Steam Deck, or not the Steam Deck, the partner.steamgames.com and see if it said a little bit more information there. This is the website where this is not really for consumers. It's available to everybody, but it's not really for consumers. It's more for the companies that want to get their games on Steam, or specifically get them deck verified, because that badge tells people that it's a good experience on the Steam Deck. Well, here's what they have to say over there. Resolution support, that's fairly self-explanatory. This thing that I have highlighted here is the most important thing, though. Default configuration. The game must ship with a default configuration on deck that results in a playable frame rate. Go back to the beginning of the video. I asked everybody, tell me what your playable frame rate is. Well, here, Valve has not defined what a playable frame rate is. And because of that, they're allowed to mark something as a verified game, whether it hits 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second or 40 frames per second. It doesn't matter, because, and again, I'm doing devil's advocate here. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, who decides what is playable? Well, ultimately, Valve decides what is playable, but here they're not telling us what playable is. So I feel like this is something that needs a definition. We need to get this defined so that when we go and buy a game based on the fact that it has a green check mark, we can launch that game knowing that the default configuration of the game will give us a number of frames per second. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know what Nintendo and Microsoft and Sony do on their end. The Steam Deck is a PC after all, but I have been on record many times referring to the Steam Deck as a console because it is incredibly console-like, and I am not the only one that refers to it as a console. Yes, it is a PC because it plays PC games. Yes, you have desktop mode, and you can use that as your main way of interacting with the internet if you want. But when you just turn on the Steam Deck and go to the store and buy a game, it is an exceedingly consoleized experience. That being said, it's a consoleized experience of games that were not made with a console in mind, which is why Valve needs the deck verified system so that they can show what games will work and what games won't work. That way, they don't have a bunch of angry customers at them saying, I just spent money on this game and it's not working on my Steam Deck. What's your problem, Valve? So, there's nothing on the Steamworks. There's nothing on the deck verified system that really defines what playable is. So I guess we need to define it for them. Why should Valve change what deck verified is? I'm arguing that Valve should pick a metric, a verifiable number, and say the game runs at this. And if the game runs at this metric, be it 20 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60 frames per second, whatever it is, they have to have that number so that we can know what to expect. Now, I'm going to talk about Hyrule Warriors real quick. A Nintendo game on the Nintendo Switch, Hyrule Warriors 2, actually. It's absolutely fantastic. I loved that game. I played it from start to finish. I would define that game as a great experience. I'm going to bring this up I would define Hyrule Warriors as a great experience on my Nintendo Switch, but that game regularly dips below 30 frames per second. It's hard for a company to look at a simple number of frames per second and use that as a defining metric as to whether or not your game is good. Well, I still think that Valve should change the rating because people spend money on this rating. And I'm sure that you could say they should do a better job making sure that they understand what verified means. But I think it's on Valve in order to be a little bit more specific if they're going to depend on deck verified as a marketing metric, which is absolutely what they're doing. Of course, I don't think that they're ever going to change deck verified as a metric, and they're never going to attach a number to it. If they do, I will be very, very surprised. And here's why. If they did attach a number to it, and there might be a soft number to it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but if they did attach a number to it, well, how does that work when you have the next version of the Steam Deck, or perhaps a Steam console that Valve ships that you hook up to your TV and play that way? You see, having deck verified basically is there to tell people, yes, this game will run on Linux using Proton, and it will run using a controller without a mouse and keyboard. That's really the goal of deck verified. But people misunderstood it. And if they bring out new hardware, and that new hardware is significantly more powerful, well, then the frame rate issue becomes really, really muddy, because what might be deck verified on, say, the Steam Deck 2 or the Steam Deck 3, let's be honest, Valve can't come to 3, would not be deck verified on Steam Deck 1. So what is the solution? Well, before we get to the solution, let's talk about this tweet from PLAYABLE. My friend Timo tweeted at Lawrence Yang. He said, Redfall is yet another example of a game being Steam Deck verified before its release, but ultimately underperforming. Perhaps it's time to ask Lawrence Yang, who works at Valve, by the way, and the team for some insight into the criteria used for awarding this badge before release. Now, PLAYABLE replied and said, does it dip under 30 during gameplay? I have to say, I have Redfall on my Xbox, and it's not a pretty picture. Like that game, it shouldn't have shipped when it did. It needed a whole lot more time to cook. But that being said, I can't speak to whether or not it dips below 30 during gameplay. But for PLAYABLE to come out and say that specific number, that tells us that maybe perhaps that when they're talking about this default configuration that results in a playable frame rate, that 30 frames per second is the playable frame rate that they're talking about. Now, I do remember off the top of my head, just in the middle of saying this, I do remember at some point that when Valve was being interviewed by IGN, they said something along the lines of 30 frames per second is what our target is. But that doesn't, like, that not being in the actual documentation means that they are not beholden to that. Okay, so I've talked about why they won't change it. And I guess the last point that I want to make before we wrap up the show here is I want to know what you all think. I already asked you to leave a comment at the beginning about what the deck verified system is. Now I want you to leave another comment where you tell me, do you think that the verified system is good enough? Or do you think it's fine that a lot of people will go to ProtonDB instead? Or do you think that maybe Valve should have a new metric on like a Steam Deck page where if I go to a game that is supposed to play great on the Steam Deck and I scroll way down near the bottom, when I scroll down near the bottom and it shows me the system requirements, should down here they say that the minimum requirements, the recommended requirements, and then what another box over here to the right that explains what exactly would the frames per second, what kind of performance would you get if you're playing this on a Steam Deck? And then if they bring out the Steam Deck 2, the same thing. Of course, over time that would keep getting muddier and muddier, but I think that they could probably deprecate older stuff as time goes on. But the question is to you, what do you guys think about this? Please let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, then you'll probably enjoy this video too, so please check that out. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.